All right, Tower of Babel. There was a tower, though they weren't really towers. Um, the first one in that picture that I sent over there, on my Facebook, that one was a smelting thing. What they'd do is they'd build a fire, and what the little ports were is they'd just take little round little cups, and they'd stick them in there. And I think it was either a square. It was a square thing. I think a square stone built, or I mean clay built building, and they would build a fire inside there. Had a small roof, I think, and I think the roof might have been because the roof had to be made out of wood or something like that, and 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 we didn't want it to burn or something like that, so they had it way up high with a little hole at the top, I think, was the general idea. And they had wooden scaffolding on the outside, and they would stick little pots about yay big pots of metal inside there. And I think there were chambers actually. There were different chambers. Forget how it worked exactly. But basically, they'd take little pots and they would stick it in there, and they'd also stick the wood fire in there too. I think that's how it worked. And then they put the little pots in with the metal. And the metal would melt down, and then they would take that, and I think they would get it to the ground really quickly to pour it into a mold or something like that. I forget what they were making. I think they're making something, either mine carts or mine cars or something. I forget. It was a very low. It was a very crude metal forge. And I think they built the train rail forms in the dirt itself, and then they would just pour the metal in there, and they would pull the rail out or something like that. I forget exactly how it worked because I really wasn't that involved in it. But it's for forging metal, and that particular one, that was a mine. It was a mine underneath, and I think it was a what's it called a. I thought the mine was deeper than that though. I thought the mine went way down or something like that. They'd use ropes or something. I don't know. I wasn't really that involved. I just know that they found some ore or something like that. They went out there to mine it. They started mining it. They did steam engines. It became this really big building. It's this really big building, and it had a big flat area, and eventually became a lot of train cars. And they used a steel smelter, and I think they eventually changed it to a big round steel thing that they could just pour. They took out the mills, and then they just used the two sides and the chimney basically has a big smelter, I think, and then they would just pour it out. But it wasn't big enough, and they built other ones from that. But it looked really nice. It had I mean, you could call them slaves at the time, but they weren't really slaves. They were just people that were being fed and being taken care of. They would work. It wasn't forced labor at all. I don't think. It was basically a paid thing. Two brothers, I think, did it. That particular mine. But it's one big on one side, but the other side fell over, and is on the ground, I think, next to it. I'm pretty sure it used to be a square building, and it had a big sign on the front. And they used I forget what they used. They used some kind of stone to make it look red or whatever. Big red building, I think. And I had the mine entrance, which kind of looked Aztec-y and stuff, and that was for storage and stuff. And I think they eventually used it for TNT storage or something like that. Forget exactly what they did there. Like I said, it was for smelting, and there's a big train yard around it, and there's something off to the other side. There's some other mines in the area, and they would bring the ore there. At first, they mined it at the location, and then they mined it elsewhere and brought it to that location. I think a lot of it was hand carts or some steam power. It wasn't a lot of steam power. They were they really couldn't get enough enough steel for the pressure vessel. But I think eventually a steam engine was taken over there. It was all using 3 foot wide track. A lot of the 3 foot wide track was taken and melted down and made into bigger track. It was just thin, just like kind of a square track. Not very good. But it's one of the things that I advised on or I knew about because I'm steam guy. You know, that's the funny thing is when you invent something, usually whenever anybody has problems, they're like, they ask you what's going on or how could I help or something like that or what I want. I was like, whatever, you know. But I didn't know about it. It was very very big, very famous building. A very famous building. I had a sign on the front, and I think they used different color stone. They used like white stone or something like that to make the sign. So the sign was actually white-ish. Used white stone, and I wanted it to be white stone, so even once it wore away, you could still see the sign, which is kind of silly, I know, but because I wanted to stand there. So the chalk outside or the outside, I used some sort of chalk or something like that to make it red, like red clay or something like that. But it looked pretty red, and looked pretty good. And I think they used a couple different coatings, but it was made out of dirt. It was all dirt, and they knew it was going to wear away. But I mean, you know, I mean, it was just a building for a while, and then it was 1850 about had a big train yard around it, a 3-foot wide track stuff. Back in the early days. Like I said, I never saw it. I never was there. I only know it from pictures and old records. And but it was a very famous building and very well known. I think a lot of mine carts were made there and stuff. And there are other mines in the area. Very, very famous. One of the more successful things. 2 brothers, I believe. I forget what happened to them. But that would be back in the early days before me, practically. Like I'd say, when you invent something, anytime anyone has a problem with it, they're going to ask you about it. Or they're going to find a way to ask you. And when it's me, because like I said, I invented communism. I invented I invented the communityism. You know, if you want to eat, you had to work. You know, there's only so much food available, and most people, you know, when you're starving and they realize that. I mean, I told my people I'd be completely honest. I mean, just be like, look, there's the food. We don't have so much. You want to eat, we can plant more, but you got to work, and that's, you know, work, food. You know, and most people, you know, basically get that. Even the Indians, even the Filipinos, everyone basically got that. That basically, you know, when it comes, you know, there are better ways, and there are ways to help people eat more or get more people to be able to be fed or live an easier life. But I mean, in order to do that, you got to eat. Even the black people got that too. The Aborigines, everyone basically understood that. You know, I mean, and most people took part. You know, I mean. You know, you lay down some track, you work, and you know, and then stuff becomes, and you know, and then you learn how to do it yourself, and then you do it yourself, and you do it with your people, and you know, I mean, and I've always been a very honest person, a very good person. It's like knowledge. I mean, that's why they call me Lucifer. Why they snake in the tree of knowledge, because you know, I basically. You know, I knew how to do things, and I basically was like, I'll figure out things. And I was like, yeah, figure it. You know, I don't know if it's just that people thought it was sacred not to fly, or they just didn't know how or what. But I mean, I figured it out, and like I figured out a lot of things. Like I basically invented communism, communism, and then community companies, because they're groups of people working for a single goal. You know, instead of being too spread out, they're more directed, and they're able to accomplish more. You know, and like a community does one thing and they do it really well, and then another community does another thing and they do it really well. You know, instead of trying to multitask too much, they, you know, directed communities basically. One community does mining and they do it really well. Whenever you try to do too many things at once, it seemed like accidents would happen or bad things would happen. So. You know, communities were basically kind of directed, like this community did mining or whatever, and that community would do whatever. You know, and that's kind of how communism got started and kind of continued. I mean, it's one of those things you just talk about it, you tell about it, and then it just kind of progresses and goes out, and you know, it works for people and people use it. And then there's democracy, which is a little bit more differently. It's more like almost like a popularity contest, but not exactly. It's not so much financialism, Um, it's funny. Socialism became because of the fact that that I invented money. There was just communism and no money, because money is really a relative thing anyway. Money is just a better way to apportion resources. It's kind of like voting almost. So because you're voting for an item, you're voting for a person or a team. You know, when you buy a cell phone, you're actually voting in a way. You're voting. You're saying that, hey, yes, I like what you're doing. I like what you've done. Do it some more. And that's really what buying things and stuff is about. It's not so much about the money. It's so much. It's about you're basically casting your vote, kind of. You know, in a way. But it's a much more faster, much more just a random whatever voting system. But it's not really. It's see. So money isn't so much money as it is a vote. You know, in a way. And you know, and they're asking for so many votes per item, basically, kind of thing in a way. So money is relative. But then you knew that already. Um, so money is kind of like a free voting system, kind of, or not a free vote. It's expense paid voting system. Anyway, and your boss does that too. And whenever you're working for him, he's basically saying that he's voting on you. He's saying, "I like you the X much. Here's X much money," which is basically like voting. You know, ballots that you carry around with you. I mean, not ballot. I mean, votes that you carry around with you. When you really think about it, it kind of works out that way. You know, until people like start printing votes, and then it's like, yeah, no one really voted for you. You're just printing it. Which is where things get kind of interesting. But anyway, though, so that's how socialism became, and that's kind of why communism or socialism doesn't really exactly work, because of the fact that in a communist society, someone who's a relative of someone or something can basically go and print money or print votes, as they say, and that is where the system gets off, because they can be doing something that shouldn't be done. You know, that nobody would have voted for them, nobody would have given them money, but they're just making it and thinking that they're doing the right thing, or thinking that it's okay to do what they're doing. But anyone would say no. But they're able to find this little area where they can actually basically continue what they're doing, at least until too many people, they cause too many problems, and then basically their votes become, the printed votes that they're making are useless. Which is why most other value systems fall flat on their face, because they've just been printing that much money and they're not really doing a good job. They're just printing more money or more votes, which is why their currency becomes devalued and worthless. So that's socialism basically, and then there's democracy, which is where the people who are in power are routinely exchanged for other people. And they can print money and print votes as well, and help their particular groups as well. And it's kind of relative. I thought democracy or the financial democracy was a little bit better, because it's kind of a breed of communism. It's kind of, I was a communist leader because I invented communityism, or communities. I was a child, didn't really need money, didn't care, so kind of invented communisms. But then I invented democracy as a better system, as a more fluid, rounded system for because I kept working on the problem because I wanted to fix communism, because communism, it has some problems, as far as there's communities that probably wouldn't want to work, but then again they would just starve. So, but then again they could just go get a gun and shoot the people who are working and take their food. So. I mean, it's a very, very big relative thing. I just thought that democracy was a better way, between the voting and the money and everything. It was more, and the programs that also help people for food, and the way that food is rolled from the stores down to the homeless or whatever, the people who can't afford food. I thought that system, the whole system, was a much better way of doing society. And that's why I basically became the Democratic leader for a while, too. And so, I mean, nowadays most people don't really want to acknowledge me or consider me in existence. But that's pretty much how it all came about.